initially when Moshe was told to tell Klal Yisrael to build the Mishkan, there were a number of materials that were needed: gold, silver, and copper. So Rashi over there cites Chazal that silver was only needed as an obligation, was only for the Matzah Shekel, which we read about in this week's Parsha. The Matzah Shekel, that half a coin, was given to purchase the communal offerings. That's what you needed, the silver coin for the Matzah Shekel, and also for the Adonim. In the Mishkan, there were vertical beams. The beams were put into sockets. The sockets were made of silver. So we needed, each Jew had to give a Matzah Shekel to provide the silver for the sockets for the beams and for the carbonate tzibor, for the public, for the communal offerings. And over there it says, Hadal lo yamit v'oshel lo yarbeh. The poor man doesn't give less than a Matzah Shekel, less than a half a coin, and the rich man does not give more than a half a coin for the carbonate tzibor, for the communal offerings. What's the reason? Communal offering, there's a certain uniformity. A tzibor, everybody is equal. We all comprise the tzibor, the community. No one has their own identity within the tzibor. You have individuals in the tzibor. A tzibor, a community, is made up of individuals, but as a totality, you have a leader in the tzibor, but the essence of a tzibor is the totality of the community. That's a tzibor. The carbon tzibor, the communal offering, represents Klal Yisrael. It's not one more than anyone else's. Therefore, there's a uniformity in the amount of money, silver, which each person contributes. The Adonim of the sockets in which the vertical beams were inserted. Hadal lo yamit v'oshel lo yarbeh. Again, there's the same uniformity. No one has his own identity. It's a totality of Klal Yisrael. The 100 beams, the 100 sockets represents Klal Yisrael. The additional silver which was given, Rashi over there says, if they had it, they would use it to make certain vessels, but it wasn't an obligation. The vessels could have been made out of anything. The knives, the ministry vessels, it didn't have to be made out of silver. But as an obligation, the silver represents the Matzah Shekel, is needed for the Matzah Shekel, for the carbonate tzibor, and for the sockets. Now, it's interesting. Many years ago, I had Agoda. Somebody had given me Agoda, was a Kabbalistic Agoda. And until that time, the cups that are used for the Dal Kosas and the Seder, we had glass cups. They're made of glass, and their volume was measured. It should be sufficient to be a revius with the Seder. Because there's a whole discussion by the Seder that it's identical to the Kiddush cup, meaning you only have to have a revius, and you have to drink a rov revius. So let's say you have a goblet, which holds a pint. You only have to drink a revius of that pint, a cheekful of that pint glass for Kiddush. But there's an argument regarding Dal Kosas, you have to drink the majority of the cup. It's not enough to drink rov revius, the majority of revius, which is a cheekful. So therefore, I always make sure to have the cup should be no more than a revius, or slightly more than a revius, slightly more than 2.9 ounces, or maybe 4.2 ounces. It would be a doraisa. Let's say with Kiddush would be Friday night. So it's a doraisa. It's a whole question. What is the volume? But everybody agrees one doesn't need more than 4.2 ounces for the first cup of the wine. So I'd always make sure that it always met the minimum volume, because there's no need to have more than that. And as a result of that, rov kos, you drink the majority of that cup, nothing more than that. Okay? But the cups were made of glass. Then I read that in this Agora, Pi Kabbalah, that you should have silver cups at the Seder. Why should you have silver? Because silver represents Midas HaRachmim. Silver is white. It's white. And as a result of that, it's Midas HaRachmim, and since the whole concept that we were worthy of the Gula was Rachmim, we were idolaters. It was only due to the covenant between Hashem and Avram Avinu that we merited Gula, we merited redemption. Therefore, the cup should be made of silver and not made of gold. Why not gold? Because gold is fire. Gold is Midas Adin. Therefore, definitely not gold. Silver, yes, but not gold. You want to make it of another material, it's fine, but it's preferable silver, because silver represents Midas HaRachmim. When it came to the Kovenant Tzibur, each person had to give a matzah shekel. It was a half a coin made of silver. That's what it was. The silver was needed for that. The whole concept of the korban, atonement, that despite the fact that we fall short of where we're at, you bring the korban tzibur, it atones for Klal Yisrael, atones for the Jewish people. That's silver. The sockets, 100 sockets, which the vertical beams are inserted in, matzah shekel. Each Jew gives a matzah shekel, half a silver coin, and those coins, that silver, that's what you make the sockets out of. What is the foundation of Klal Yisrael? What holds those beams up, those vertical beams? Those silver half coins which each Jew gives. There's that uniformity. Nobody has any identity. It represents what? That represents humility also. That's what? That's anivus. It's not me more than you, I more than you. Adalo yamit va'osher lo yarbe. The poor man gives no less, the rich man gives no more, although he could give a lot more. We're not interested in giving more. So that is the foundation of Klal Yisrael. Firstly, silver is Midas HaRachmim. And when do we merit Midas HaRachmim? When we have that humility. When do we merit Rachmim? When we have humility. There's no individual identity. The rich man, the poor man, everybody's of equal standing. We make no differentiation. Okay? So this is what we speak about, the Matzah Shekel. To purchase carbonate tzibur, to purchase the communal offerings. It points out, the Ramban says that the Mishkan was a replica of Sinai. The many things that were at Sinai, we only needed the Mishkan because of what? Because of the Chet Egel, as we mentioned. I mean, certain things, the Aron would have been needed, the Mizbech was needed, but many other things were not needed, meaning the circumscribing of that location with the crushing, with the vertical beams, wouldn't have been needed. Many things were needed, but it's a carryover. For instance, he mentions the Ramban, fire is what is red. That's fire. The Aron was made of gold. The Kodesh Kadoshim was gold, the Holy of Holies. The sanctuary, which was covered, you had the golden Mizbeach, the golden altar. You had the Shulchan, was made of gold. You have the menorah was made of gold. The outer vessels, the Mizbeach and the Choshes, right? The Mizbeach HaOlah. The Mizbeach that you had for the burnt offering was copper. And anything, the covered sanctuary going inward, that was all gold. Everything was gold there. Gold represents fire. That's Sinai. That's the Shechina. Shechina came down. Hashem brought heaven to earth. That was the Shechina. But Rameir Simcha says, what are the beams? The beams, what do they represent? Hashem says to Moshe, let the Jewish people encircle the mountain. So the encircling the mountain, when they encircled the mountain, that was the context for the Shekhinah to descend, to be in their midst. They first had to encircle the mountain. Identically, when they would dismantle the Mishkan, when they would travel, the Shekhinah was not there. It's only when they reconstructed the Mishkan with the outer beams, the vertical beams, then the Shekhinah entered and everything was set up within that circumscribed with the vertical beams. It says the vertical beams represent Klal Yisrael. That's Klal Yisrael at Sinai. Klal Yisrael at Sinai. So if that is our representation, what is our identity? Matzah Shekel. On what do we stand? We stand on the matzahs. There's no more or less. We're all uniform. What's our claim to fame? we're members of Klal Yisrael. That's our only claim to fame. It has nothing to do with what we have or what we don't have. It's who we are. And who are we? We're Jews. B'nai Yisrael. And that stands on the sockets, which are what? Which are the matzah shekel, where we don't differentiate between the rich man and the poor man. Now, we made it a point, which we discussed in the past. How many sockets were there? There were 100 sockets. 100. We discussed the significance of number of 100. If you remember, 100 counters the what? The consequence of what? Of the sin of Adam Rishon. We mentioned then, if you remember, that when Yaakov Avinu came to Shechem, he returned to Canaan, he purchased a piece of property from Me'ek Sita. And then, after purchasing from Me'ek Sita for 100, the denomination of the coin was Sita, says, Vayiven Mizbeach LaHashem. And that location, he built a Mizbeach. So over there, we mentioned the name of the, in the Kli Yakar, that the significance number 100, we find that after Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas, it says Hashem put his palm on Adam. Although his height was from earth to heaven, he was minimized to 100 amma. He became 100 amma. So what was the consequence of Chet? To what degree did the evil of the tree of knowledge minimize him? To 100. So 100 represents the consequence of Chet. That's the spiritual deficiency. The wall in the Heichel, in the Beis HaMikdash that Shlomo Melech built was 100 amma. Why was that 100 amma? Because what is the significance of the Beis HaMikdash? To bring karbonos, it's the location of atonement to counter the effect of sin. So it's 100 versus 100. So he explains that Yaakov purchased the location for 100 ksita. He prepared the location to be the location to counter, that's the counter force to negative, and there he built a mizbeach. That's the Kli Yakar. So I'm saying we find continuously the number of 100. 100 always represents the counter force to evil. The Mishkan, the beams, what did they stand on? They were inserted in sockets. How many sockets were there? There were 100. So the 100 represents the positive counter force against the negative. This is the location of kapora, of atonement. But what is it? In that 100, there's no identification of the rich and the poor. Everybody is of equal status. Because what is the source of chet? What is the source of sin? We make our own decision. We trot our own paths. If you have humility, you do exactly the way you're instructed to conduct yourself. Therefore, the sockets, which are 100, which is the counterforce to evil, to negative, kapara, it's always 100, and there, one doesn't have any identity, everybody's in equal standing. The only person going the Holy of Holies was only the Kohen Gadol at that moment. All the avodah of Yom Kippur was only the high priest. No one else was qualified to do the avodah Yom Kippur. If the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, was not sufficiently qualified to be the Kohen Gadol, when he go into Holy Holies, he would not leave alive. That's how exact it was, because when you, in the proximity of the Shekhinah, unless you're of that special status, nearly at a perfect level or whatever's expected, you cannot, you don't have the capacity to survive to be the presence of the Shekhinah. That's the exactness. Because the Shekhinah is perfect. On an absolute level, within the human level, you have to be pretty close to that. And if you're not, the Kohen Gadol expires. He dies. That's what it says during Bai Sheni. There were over 300 Kohanim Gedolim. Because the Roman governor would sell that office to the highest bidder. As a result of that, they were not qualified. If every year, the person would not make it out of the Holy of Holies. And of those, the 420 years of the second Beis HaMikdash, Shimon HaTzadik was a Kohen Gadol for 40 years. 40 years. And Yochanan Kohen Gadol, was 80 years. So every year they pull out another Kohen Gadol. They'd have to install. It's a side issue. So if people would know, they would not make it out every year. And you had to be at that special level. I mean, who would want to be the Kohen Gadol? Who would want that? If every person was not quite where he should be, and the only reason why you received that appointmentship is because it was given to the highest payer, who would want it? But yet, year in and year out, another person was appointed because he paid it, and he didn't make it out. I mean, you see what ego is. That even though we're not talking about these people who were showing, they weren't evil, but they weren't quite where they should be. They believed that maybe they were where they should be, and even if not, but you know what it means to be at that level and to be taken. It's like the kiss of death from Hashem. Even if that should be, it's not the worst thing. It's worthwhile. If you merit to be that, it's worthwhile. Yisisas Rosh Bnei Yisrael Lefkudeim. So Rashi says, what Siso? Siso always means uplift. Lefkudeim, according to their numbers, Rashi, Loshen Kabbalah, Targumo, Kishetachvot Kabel Schum Minyonim. Das Kamim. If you going to want to know the number, how many Jews there are, Al Timneim Legugolis. They should not be counted as a head count. Each person should give the half a silver coin. And you'll count the shkolim, the coins, and then you'll know through that medium, you'll know the number. And each person will give an atonement for his nefesh to Hashem when they're counted. And because they're giving an atonement, lo yibem negev. Therefore, there will not be a plague when they are counted. When you count the person, you're opening a can of worms, so to say. You're opening a problem, which that problem will bring prosecution, which ultimately could bring plague. But since that half a coin for which you're counting them is being used to purchase the korban, which is kapora, therefore, using that coin, although simultaneously you know the number, that'll counter the prosecution, because that's kapora. Now, the Gemara tells us in Brachos that a person is mechavin in his tefillah. He's very focused on his tefillah. It can actually activate midas hadin, attribute of justice. So Tosfos explains, what does it mean? Person prays well. You pray and you feel Hashem owes it to you. Hashem should respond to your supplication. Rather than being mispal with humility, as it's cited in Shulchan Aruch, it's ka'oni. Like a poor man who comes to seek alms, that's the way you should feel when you stand in the presence of Hashem. You're totally unworthy, but you feel that because you prayed so well, you're worthy. That activates midas hadin. Why? What is midas hadin? We all know nobody's perfect. Shlomo says in Koheles, there's no perfect tzaddik. There's no such thing as a perfect tzaddik. As a result of that, nobody's record is perfect. So if that's the case, why isn't there midas hadin if all our records are far from perfect? The answer is because midas hadin is only when Hashem allows Satan to prosecute. If Satan is not allowed to prosecute, there's midas harachmim. Because if Hashem would allow Satan to prosecute the record, to audit the record, the world couldn't survive. As a result of that, we have midas harachmim. But the times which we activate, a person can actually activate midas hadin. You bring a person, God forbid, brings it upon himself. If you pray and you feel you're deserving, you should be answered because you prayed so well. So if that's the way you feel, immediately in Shamayim, they take notice. Well, this man thinks he's so special. maybe we should look at his record. And that causes an audit of the record. And once the record is audited, chas v'sholom, that's midas hadin. Because the prosecutor is the Sultan. Rosh Hashanah is midas hadin. Everybody, as it says, every person, his record is audited on Rosh Hashanah. What count is that midas hadin is the shofar, is the schus of the shofar, the ram's horn. The tkir shofar, the schus of the aked, that count is it. But if not for that, we couldn't survive it. It's a known fact that whenever Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, chas v'sholom, very often the tragedy is that year. Because we don't blow the shofar on Shabbos, because the Gemara tells us there's a concern that the person may transport the shofar in public domain. Therefore, Chazal said, if that is the case, we don't blow shofar Rosh Hashanah, falls out on Shabbos. So now we have a problem. So what counters the prosecution of Satan? So there's a whole discussion. That we're willing to forego the shofar, covet shemayim, not to violate the Shabbos, that schus counters, and that silences the prosecution. So there's a famous word from the Orach Laner. The Orach Laner writes that what's the reason why we don't blow shofar or Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos? Because we're concerned somebody may transport the shofar and violate the Shabbos. So for covet Shabbos, we're willing not to to forego the shofar. So it's only because we esteem Shabbos to such a degree. So the Orach Laner says, but what about if Jews don't observe the Shabbos as they should? Shabbos itself comes with a claim. I wasn't observed properly. Here they forwent the shofar for my kavod, for my honor. That my honor should not be breached, that Shabbos should not be breached. And they go, and they're not that careful observing of Shabbos. So the year we don't have the shofar to silence the prosecution, that we observe Shabbos so meticulously, that's who silences it. But what if we don't keep Shabbos so meticulously? Just the contrary. It activates a prosecution. And therefore, the Orach Laner says, if Shabbos is not kept as it should be kept, the year that we don't blow shofar Rosh Hashanah, we find tragedies during that year. October 7th happened. It was Rosh Hashanah Shechalios B'Shabbos. That tragedy. I'm not even talking about Jews who don't know anything. Tinik Shenishba. Talking about Jews who know better. How well versed are people in Shabbos, in the laws of Shabbos? The Chofetz Chaim writes in the introduction to the third volume that unless you study Hilchos Shabbos, the laws of Shabbos, it is impossible not to violate Shabbos on a Torah level. I'm not talking about on a rabbinic level, on a Torah level. Just to know the basic understanding of how to observe Shabbos. So how many people know that? What borer is, what bishul is, which we haven't learned yet, what is cooking, kli rishon, kli sheni, kli shlishi. It depends on what it is. And if you have to do things, you do a klachayat, you do it unconventionally, all these things, unless you study it. But people are so oblivious to it. And they get used to a certain way of behavior. That's the way they do it. As a result of that, they have the prosecution. So when you count a person, that's individualization. Each person has an identity. When you identify people individually, that can actually activate a prosecution. It's him. It's who's him? Who is he? But if you give the coin, which is used for kapara, which is which contributes to the communal offering, simultaneously, although there's an individualization of each Jew, but since that individualization comes through the Masle Shekel, which is kapara, that silences the prosecution of that individualization of that person. That count is that there shouldn't be an audit for that reason. If you take a look at the Sifarno over here on the pasuk, the verse Yud Beis, Ki hakoros haminyan bi'ishei odom umitzad hishtanus hakora bi'ishov me'avoy v'hefsid. What do you count people? Because people are here one day, they're not here the next day. So due to people's existence, the way they behave, whatever it is, there's always change. And because there's change, therefore we have to always count to see what the number is. Because the number is not always a constant number. The reason why they may not be here, because they may be sinners. Therefore, whenever you count, it always activates a prosecution. Each person gives atonement for his soul to honor Hashem. He's the Rachum that will atone for the sin. Therefore, when it comes to this, the rich man doesn't give more and the poor man doesn't give less. Therefore, we don't see a person who's wealthy and more. There's no identity. There's no identity. Because we don't want to identify people. They should be individualized. You're this and that's that. There's a uniformity. Because the moment there's that identity, the uniqueness of each person, that activates persecution. It's interesting. We find the Gemara tells us that the world stands on in the schus of Lamed Vav Tzadikim Nistorim, the 36 hidden tzadikim. They're hidden. Why they have to be hidden? And if you know who they are, they have to be hidden. So simply, you say they have to be hidden. Why? Maybe, the Gemara talks about that there was a story with Rava that his wine never soured. Never soured. And when somebody made it a point to show, by the wine, something unusual, because wine never soured. So it says, the Chacham nosun einayimbo, and people, they started to observe this. Immediately his wine soured. There was an ayin hara. Ayin hara. It's unusual. When a person is individualized, he's something special, it's not a good thing. The Gemara tells us in Brachos that when Chana was the mother of Shmuel, and she was barren. Chana didn't have children. And she was conceived on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah tells us. And when she prayed, this is Tfilas Chana. Many laws we extrapolate, we learn from the Tfilah of Chana when she prayed for a child. Shmuel was her child. She said, and one, he should be an ish bein anoshim. He should be a man among men. What does that mean? Mara says, I don't want him to be exceptional, that he should be noticed by others. I want him just to blend in. He should be a man among, it's not he should be a man among men. That doesn't mean, it means he should blend in, he shouldn't be noticed. Why? Because if he's noticed, he'll be subject to the Ayin Hara. That's the Gemara in Brachos. That was Chana's supplication to Hashem. You give me that special child, but I don't want him to be noticed as being special. Because the moment he has noticed, I'm concerned about Ayin Hara. But what's Ayin Hara? When people go and look at a person that he's unique, that activates that prosecution. That means you're not anonymous. It's better to be below the radar. The moment you're above the radar, that means you're noticed. You notice, they say, everybody speaks about it. He's special, he's this, whatever it is. You don't want to be individualized. And here we want to know the number, which is each person knowing that he exists. Even that, it's Ma'aseh Shekel. It's for the sake of what? You need the kapara simultaneously. But yet the Chazal tell us, it's a long Ramban at the beginning of Parshas Bamidbar, that David HaMelech, because he counted Klal Yisrael, there was a plague. And thousands of people died because David counted them. So the Ramban asks, David didn't know what each elementary school child knows, that we don't count Jews? You mean to say he didn't use the medium of the Ma'aseh Shekel? Ramban says definitely he did. He definitely counted. So if that's the case, why was there plague? So he explains over there that even when you count Jews, they have to be counted for a purpose. If you count Jews just that we should know their number, that brings about not good results. Why? So he excites the Chazal, the Medrash, that when were the Jews always counted? When they went out to war for conscription, to know if you had a standing army, how many men were in the army. Because ain't so much on this. We don't rely on miracles, even though the actually victory is based on siyata d'shmaya, but ain't so much on this. So they're the countings for a reason. So even if you have a medium, if you don't have a reason and it's only to know it's for your own glory, it's not a good reason. It's not a sufficient reason. Even though the coin will be used for a korban, it's not a sufficient reason. It's not adequate. And that's the reason David, so what did David? It says, the Ramban over there says, it says in the Pasuk, Lo Yisofim Mirov. The Jews will be so numerous, Lo Yisofer, they should not be counted Mirov. Because Hashem said, we will be unlimited number. Therefore, you shouldn't count us. So I asked the question, but factually speaking, if we are computable, so that's the case, we haven't reached that number that we can't be quantified. So what's the problem? So what we explained in the past was this. What is the innate value of the Jewish people? Is it quantitative or qualitative? Our value is not numbers. Our value is with the Am Hashem. We're God's people. We're the Goy Kodosh. At Sinai, we became Hashem's people. Avraham Avinu single-handedly defeated, or with a few men, with Eliezer, he defeated the four mightiest kings. It's not about numbers. It's about who you are. If you appreciate and recognize who you are, that's what it's all about. So therefore, to count them, to know how many of them, Ramban says, he says two approaches. Either David, normally you count, as we'll read in this week's parsha, from the age of 20 and above. You don't count from the age of bar mitzvah. When it comes to Machzah Shekel, it's 20 and above, not from the age of 13, which is bar mitzvah. David wanted to know how many subjects he has. He only know the number from 20 and above. He wanted to know the totality of cloud, so people who are of obligation. So he counted them from the age of 13. That was a problem. Because it says, because what do you have to know the number? If it's to go to war, that's ain't som chalal on this. We don't rely on miracle. You have to have a standing army. But if for any other reason, why are you counting them? There's no reason to count them. Number is irrelevant. If you recognize who you are, the Am Hashem, and Hashem's your backer, what's the problem? What do you have to know numbers? As a result of that, if you value the number, that quantitative, it makes the difference. I'll show you quantitative means nothing. And that's why that brought about, activated a plague, and they died. That the number you thought it was, it's less than that number.
Rabbi.
1 second. No. What should they give when they're counted? No. Whoever is over Apkud, whoever is counted, that person should give Machzah Shekel b'Shekel HaKodesh. A half a coin, the coin of Kodesh, Esrim Geira HaShekel. Esrim Geira, that's a small 20 small silver coins. Machzah Shekel Trubal Hashem. What does that mean? Now, over here, Zeh Yitnu. Rashi's Herolo Kamin Mabeh Shalesh, Umishkolo Machzah Shekel V'Omelo Kozeh Yitnu. Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu a Mabeh Shalesh, a coin made of fire, and its weight was Machzah Shekel, and he says, this is what you should give. Zeh is like to identify what it is. Hovel HaPkudim, Dechamodim Mavirin Esanim Nizachazeh. When you count people, you count them, they go under a rod. You count them. As when you count for Ma'aseh Behema, you count every 10th sheep, every 10th animal is number 10, and that actually is the equivalent of consecration. Machzah Shekel, B'mishkal hashekel shekatzavti l'chlishko bo shikle kodesh. Coach Kolar Amurim Parshas Erch. Okay, that's Magero. What's a gero? Loshin Mo. Mo is the smallest silver coin. Okay. So if here the Balaturim says what's Zeh do? Kiminyan Zeh. Zeh is what? What's the numerical value of Zeh? 12. Pirish Yudbe Shvotim Yitnu. The Ikulaman Diomar Shevet Levi will name nu. So we have 13 tribes. So this is allusion, according to the opinion that what? That Shevet Levi was not counted. It was only Zeh. The ones who were counted, they're the ones who actually had to give the Matzah Shekel. But Levi wasn't counted. Right? They were not subject to conscription. The ones who were the standing army was Levi. Levi was not part of that. Esrim.
Did they give a half a shekel also, Levi?
No. According to this opinion, they didn't give a half a shekel. Only the ones that were counted gave the Matzah Shekel. Levi did not give. We'll discuss that in a minute. Esrim, Bigmachi Osher Vidal. Esrim, the numerical value is Osher and Dal. Rich and poor, show you Kulam Shovit was there. Meaning there was a uniformity. They were all equal. It was irrelevant how much money you had or how much money you didn't have. That's Esrim. Now, we said the Matzah Shekel was used to purchase the Korbanei Tzibur, the communal offerings. Women did not give the Matzah Shekel. Anybody below the age of 20 did the Matzah Shekel. Was he atoned by the communal offering? The answer is yes, right? It's two different things. If you're part of the Tzibur, you're atoned by this Korban. It's a Korban Tzibur. If you're part of the Tzibur. Who provides the means for that Korban? From the age of 20 and above. They provide the means. But in terms of what it represents Klal Yisrael. So as long as you're Klal Yisrael, whether you're a Levi, who you didn't contribute, because the Torah says a Levi doesn't contribute, or a woman doesn't contribute, or a person who's, although he's bar mitzvah, if he's less than the age of 20, doesn't contribute. Doesn't make a difference. He has no obligation to contribute, but nevertheless, since he's part of Klal, so he's part of that Korban Tzibur. So when the Korban, that sacrifice atones for the Tzibur, the woman, the Levi, the person below the age of 20, he's atoned because he's part of the Tzibur. There's a position which is cited that Musaf, a person who's less than 20 years old, should not be the Shliach Tzibur to daven Musaf. Why? Because the Musaf represents the Korban Tzibur. I mean, explicitly, the Musaf. It says, Shachris min Chamayrav is Keneged Ovis Tiknu. Although it also has to do with the Tamidim, with the communal offerings, but it's not specifically the Korban Tzibur. Avram prayed Shachris, Mincha, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Ma'ariv, Arvis. But Musaf is specifically has nothing to do with the Ovis HaKadoshim. That's the Korban. Therefore, it's cited that a person who's less than 20 should not daven Musaf on an ongoing basis for the Omud, because he himself doesn't give the Matzah Shekel. Everybody takes issue with this, and they reject the opinion totally. Just because you don't give the Matzah Shekel, it doesn't mean to say you're not part of the Korban Tzibur. As I said, the Levi, the women, somebody less than 20, he has kapara. So he didn't contribute. Doesn't make a difference. And therefore, there's not even the basis for a chumrah, for a stringency that a person less than 20 should not be the shlich tzibur for Musaf, as long as he's qualified in other areas to be the shlich tzibur. Okay, let's see the halacha. Why there were 100 blessed with Sadi Chazal. Sisra was the Assyrian general. You read in Navi where Yoel, she put the stake through his temple. That's how she killed him. After every battle, the Sisra was a person had enormous strength and his mother would wait in the window, waiting for him to come back with all his glory, with the spoils of war, with the captives, and she would sit at the window with pride to wait for her son to come back. That battle with Dvorah and Barak, he never came back from that battle. So when he didn't come back, it says she cried 100 sobs. 100 sobs. Hear her, because she realized her son was killed. So because she cried from the core of her being, so to counter those 100 sobs of the mother of Sisera, we blow 100 blasts of the shofar. That's Chazal. What is it all about? Again, nobody's perfect. The Jewish people are not perfect. You never know what the cry of that mother, coming from that, the purest place in terms of a mother for a child, what prosecution it could activate, because nobody's perfect. That could activate a terrible level of prosecution. So, but what is it, 100? 100, as we said, that's a representation of evil. So we blow the 100 to counter that. Again, it's the same thing. Sisera was a representation of the evil. His mother was that representation. She cried 100 sobs representing what her son was. The loss of that. As a result of that, we have 100 blasts, which silences the prosecution, which is number 100 to counter those sobs. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berurah.